Everyone. I know that we are waiting for one commissioner, but Keely is here. We're good. We're set to go. So good morning. I'm Mitch Mitchell. I'm chair of the San Diego Housing Commission Board of Commissioners. It is 9:07 a.m. on April 16th, 2026, and I'm going to call to order today's special meeting of the board. We are meeting in person this morning with commissioners, staff, and members of the public in attendance. We have a quorum. And here, Vice Chair Klempner just arrived. Video of today's meeting is also being streamed live online. So to watch today's meeting, please connect to www.sdhc.org. To accommodate additional members of the public who may wish to participate in today's meeting, we have set up an overflow room down the hall. The live streaming video will be shown down there as well. Speaker slips are available in the overflow room for those who wish to provide comments to the board today. Staff inside that room will bring the speaker slips to me. At the appropriate time, our staff will escort speakers from the overflow room here to make sure they will provide their comments. Members of the public who are here in the boardroom who wish to provide comments also need to complete a speaker slip. Please submit your speaker slip to Vice President of Communications, Scott Marshall, who's standing here on the side. And if you're in the overflow room, again, look for the Housing Commission staff. In a moment, I will be proposing that agenda items 102, 103, 104, and 105 be placed on the consent agenda for today's meeting. Members of the public may provide comments about items on the consent agenda by submitting a speaker slip for the item before the board considers the consent agenda. To speak in favor of any item, please submit a gold speaker slip. To speak in opposition, please submit a pink speaker slip. And if you wish to address the board on a topic that is not on the agenda, please submit a white speaker slip. Members of the public will have 3 minutes each to provide their comments about the agenda items or non-agenda public comments. Bless you. However, if a large number of people wish to provide non-agenda public comments or speak on a single agenda item, they will be limited to 1 minute each. Collective testimony by those who support or oppose an item will be limited to no more than 15 minutes total per side. So when I call your name, please step to the podium, state your name for the record, and begin making your comments. As shown on today's agenda, non-agenda public comments, commissioner comments in the minutes of the last meeting will be heard at the end of today's meeting. As I said a few minutes ago, I'm proposing that the following items for consent agenda today be item 102, item 103, the operating agreement with Alpha Project for the Imperial Shelter, item 104, the Alpha Project operating agreement with Alpha Project for the Harm Reduction Shelter, and I think I mentioned item 102 is the elevated elements repair at Park Crest, and item 105, which is the operating agreement with St. Vincent de Paul Village, doing business as Father Joe's Villages. I do not have any speaker slips for the consent agenda, so that concludes the public comment period for these items. Commissioners, any comments on the consent agenda? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion. So moved. Motion by Vice Chair Klempner. Second. Second by Keely. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. We have a motion and a second. And all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Any opposed? No abstentions. That motion carries unanimously. All right. We will next move on to item 100, and this is the workshop and discussion about the Housing Commission's proposed fiscal year 2027 budget. We will take public comments after the staff presentation. Our President and CEO, Lisa Jones, will introduce this item, and I will say as she prepares to introduce this item, we have been signaling to everyone we are experiencing a moment in time where the cuts are impactful. But I want to say ahead of time, I've been really pleased with how the team here at the Housing Commission is handling all of the challenges that we're being presented with. So with that, Lisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Mitchell. For more than a year now, we have spoken with the board, our council members, and our community partners and the public about the fiscal challenges the Commission is navigating. Throughout this time, and still today, our focus has been on achieving long-term fiscal stability so we can continue to support the thousands of families who rely on us and our remaining staff who serve these families and our community, focusing on our residents, our participants, our families, and our staff. There is still ongoing uncertainty about federal, state, and local funding as many public housing authorities across the country and government agencies at all levels experience similar challenges. For example, we still have not yet received our funding letter from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to let us know how much federal voucher funding we will be receiving this calendar year. We have used educated estimates to develop our proposed budget. In the upcoming fiscal year, we will still need to continue to deplete our reserves to cover our budgeted expenses. However, with the steps we have taken to contain costs and, where possible, generate revenue, we have developed a balanced budget that mitigates the amount we need from reserves and makes us more fiscally stable going forward. This morning is our budget workshop. At our next meeting next month, we will ask for the board's approval of the budget, which would then move to the Housing Authority for final consideration. Azucena Valladolid, our Chief Operating Officer, and Christelle Vanderwit, our VP of Financial Services, will present the proposed budget. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Mitchell and Commissioners. This morning, we will start with an overview of our proposed fiscal year 2027 budget, discuss the challenges we're navigating along with the actions we've taken to balance our budget, and highlight some key components as we discuss our objectives and deliverables. Next, we will go through the uses of funds in this budget and then conclude with anticipated revenues. We can tell this slide 4? Yeah, okay. We are proposing a budget of $678 million. This includes federal, state, and local funding sources. Our proposed budget is based upon the best information we currently have about our anticipated revenue. As Lisa mentioned, we are still waiting for a funding letter from HUD, and state and local budget approval processes are underway. This budget also continues to advance our mission to foster social and economic stability by ensuring the development and preservation of quality, affordable housing solutions for San Diegans. As you know, we have been navigating many fiscal challenges. Our federal funding is not sufficient to support rental assistance for the families currently in our voucher programs. Our rental assistance costs continue to rise as well. Our average housing assistance payment is now 84% higher than it was in fiscal year 2020. This has required us to use diminishing moving to work voucher reserves to achieve a balanced budget. We also continue to draw on local reserves to meet the property maintenance needs of the aging affordable housing properties in our real estate portfolio. Local reserves are insufficient to meet all of the needs that they have supported in the past. More of our local funds are needed to support our affordable housing properties. So we have less in local funds to support other agency activities that further our mission. These are the reasons we have made the difficult decisions we have shared with you in the past few months. As you will see later in today's presentation, though the measures we have taken have slowed down our draw on reserves, we are still not yet able to maintain the basic minimum reserve levels in fiscal year 2027. To navigate through these additional challenges, we are containing cost and, where possible, generating additional revenue, both which are key components of continuing efforts through our strategic plan. A few of our recent initiatives are shown on this slide. They include adjusting our rental assistance participants' family contribution towards their housing. HUD recently approved those adjustments, and we have started notifying families about these changes, which will take effect in October. These updates are necessary for us to prevent ending assistance for hundreds of voucher families. Instead, we will be able to continue to assist all the families currently in our rental assistance program. Our recent reduction in workforce, the decision to not provide performance incentives or cost of living adjustments for senior leadership positions in the current fiscal year, and eliminating performance incentives for all staff in fiscal year 2027 are additional cost containment efforts. After years with minimal or no rent increases at our properties, we also will be raising rents within the limits of the California Tenant Protection Act. This will generate additional revenue while we ensure we maintain our units as quality, affordable housing for the families who rent from us. And we have raised our fees for land use activities. These changes realize cost savings that will mitigate our need to continue to draw down reserves in fiscal year 2027. Along with other initiatives in our strategic plan, these efforts will also create a more sustainable fiscal outlook for the future. With that in mind, we are proposing a fiscal year 2027 budget of $678 million. We will go into more detail about changes from last year's budget later in this presentation. The slide shows our budget over the past 5 years. Budgets have been higher in recent years due to new funding sources, such as the state's Home Key program, which launched in 2020. Christelle will now go over objectives, deliverables, and uses of funds.
Thank you. Good morning. With this budget, we'll dedicate more than $343 million to help approximately 17,000 low-income households pay for their rental housing through the federal Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program. We'll also continue to assist emergency housing voucher families through fall 2026. This is when we anticipate that the remaining federal funding for the emergency housing voucher program will run out. Emergency housing voucher family will continue to be prioritized for new project-based voucher housing units that come online for up to 1 year after their rental assistance has ended. Our budget includes 191 new project-based voucher units for households with low income or experiencing homelessness in fiscal year 27. And we will support our SDHC Achievement Academy to provide career planning, job readiness, and personal financial education programs, and connect participants to community resources. The Achievement Academy, along with our partners, will assist families as they prepare for the updated family contribution amounts that will be implemented later this year. The proposed budget also supports the creation and preservation of affordable housing. We have proposed committing up to $22 million in gap financing to developers to leverage with other funding sources to increase the affordable housing supply in our city. The funding sources for this notice of funding availability will be $13 million of federal home funds and $9 million from the city's Affordable Housing Fund. We will be also updating our budget to include approximately $6 million in City Neighborhood Enhancement Fund that we will administer for affordable housing preservation, subject to approval from the Housing Authority and City Council next month. Including our nonprofit affiliate, the Housing Commission will continue to own or manage over 4,100 affordable rental housing units in 27. We have also budgeted $7.9 million to rehabilitate Housing Commission-owned units. This supports our ongoing commitment to provide quality, affordable housing. In addition, we have dedicated $3.1 million towards assisting up to 35 San Diegan households in becoming first-time home buyers. In fiscal year 27, we'll continue to administer homelessness shelters and service programs that serve thousands of San Diegans at risk of or experiencing homelessness in our community. The total proposed homelessness budget is $76.5 million and includes $23.3 million, or about 30%, of SDHC grants and local funds. In our current fiscal year, through the end of March, the programs we operate directly have served nearly 1,900 households. 989 households experiencing homelessness have secure housing through our rapid rehousing, diversion, and landlord engagement programs. Another 757 households have maintained housing stability through our housing instability and prevention programs. The city-funded and continuum of care programs we administer have served nearly 9,000 households year-to-date through various homelessness programs such as shelters, transitional housing, rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, and other supporting services. Oh. Watch out for the train. So we continue to work with the city's homelessness strategy and solutions department and the mayor's office as the city develops its fiscal year 27 homelessness budget. The Housing Commission proposed fiscal year 27 budget for city-funded homelessness programs totals $53.3 million. It is important to note that the homeless budget that you see today related to city-funded programs is the SDHC's proposed budget that we submitted to the city. It will support ongoing operation of over 1,300 shelter beds and 87 transitional housing beds. The mayor proposed budget came out yesterday, so this number will adjust as the city finalizes its budget. City funding will also continue to support homelessness programs, including the Housing Instability Prevention Program, the Eviction Prevention Program, the Homelessness System Coordination Services, and storage centers. We'll wrap up our presentation with a few slides about the proposed uses and sources of funds. The proposed budgeted spending for FY27 amounts to $560 million. It consists of $362 million for rental assistance programs, $97 million for real estate, which include the $18 million for capital expenditures shown on this slide, $72 million for homelessness, and $27 million for operation support. For uses, we'll start with personnel costs. The FY27 budget reflects the impact of the staffing decisions that were made. The recent reduction in our workforce and eliminating performance incentive for all staff in fiscal year 27 result in an $11.9 million savings in personnel costs. The decrease you see here in housing program expense reflects the anticipated impact of the changes to the family contribution amounts in our rental assistance and public housing programs. The slide also shows a 5% increase in property expenses, professional services, supplies, and others. This reflects the increase in insurance expenses, maintenance, and protective service costs for affordable housing properties. And lastly, the capital expenditure decrease is mainly due to HomeKey-related property acquisition costs in fiscal year 26 that will not reoccur in 27. In fiscal year 27, we'll have a net decrease of 54 positions. This reflects the 58 eliminated positions discussed earlier in this presentation, offset by the addition of 3 positions for property management of the newly acquired Starling Drive site, and a direct hire position to serve as our homeownership advisor. The homeownership advisor position is primarily funded by a grant from the Wells Fargo Foundation that supports our middle-income first-time homebuyer program. Next, we'll look at the anticipated sources of funds.
That wasn't me. That was
Getting a lot of surprises today. The table on this slide shows a comparison of the funding sources for fiscal year 27 and 26. We have 3 main funding sources: federal, local, and state. I want to highlight some of the higher variances in dollars and percentages. In the federal funding section, you will see a decrease in the row for the moving to work funding. We have budgeted an estimated $348 million from HUD in fiscal year 2027 and approximately $16.7 million in voucher reserve drawdown to cover our rental assistance expenses. As the changes in family contribution amounts take effect in the upcoming year, we'll start to see savings in the amount we spend to provide rental assistance. So while we will need to continue to use our reserves to cover the program costs in 27, the decrease in moving to work funds in this row reflect a reduction in the reserve amount we'll use compared to fiscal year 26. The home fund increase is due to the anticipated funding of loans based on when developments achieve specific milestone. It's typically 75% being dispersed at close and the rest at different phases of constructions. And you'll notice a large decrease in the federal and state section for the funding related to the Home Key Plus acquisition. $45 million were budgeted in FY26 for the acquisition and rehabilitation of a new Home Key Plus property. The acquisition of the Starling Drive property took place in March last month, and about $8 million will be set aside to complete the rehabilitation, and that piece is included in the 27 budget. In the local funding category for real estate, we're expecting an increase in revenue due to scheduled rent increase at Housing Commission affordable rental housing properties. And in the state funding section, in addition to reduction related to the Home Key project, you'll note a decrease in other state funds, mainly related to the timing of the draw on the infill infrastructure grant funds. Federal revenue continues to be the primary source of funding and accounts for 73% of new revenue, with MTW funds, more specifically, representing 63% of the budgeted new revenue for fiscal year 27. Please note those are preliminary estimates as we have not yet received notification of our federal award for MTW voucher funds, but are hoping to receive it later this month. Our $120 million in fund balance is composed of $66 million of program restricted fund related to notices of funding availability and other affordable housing activities. We also have $54 million of reserve, real estate replacement reserve, operating reserve, debt service reserve, and MTW housing assistance payment reserve. Last year, the Housing Commission established a new methodology for minimum operational reserve targets to ensure we maintain financial stability, meet operational obligations, and are prepared for emergencies or unforeseen expenditures. This has become even more important as we see ongoing uncertainty in our funding appropriation at the federal, state, and local levels. The methodology includes a minimum reserve level needed to address the critical, urgent need of our agency and was introduced during our last budget review and approval cycle. The methodology and analysis also included target stabilization reserve levels for sound fiscal stability based on industry best practices. The $54 million of reserve projected is significantly lower than the minimum reserve target of $70 million and well below the recommended stabilization target reserve level. At this board meeting next month, we'll be recommending your approval of the proposed fiscal year 27 budget. The budget will be adjusted as needed as additional information becomes available, including guidance from the city and our federal funding letter from HUD. Now I'll turn it over to Asusina for closing comments.
Fiscal challenges often require difficult decisions. We have made those decisions to prepare our agency as we develop the proposed fiscal year 2027 budget. As we have throughout this process, we remain committed to providing the ongoing support the families in our programs depend on for their housing, as well as supporting our staff. When we receive more information and make necessary adjustments to the budget in the coming weeks, these principles will continue to guide us. As we have discussed today, in the coming fiscal year, we will continue to use our reserves to assist our families and serve our community. But the efforts we have discussed with you today and other initiatives we are undertaking provide us more fiscal stability and move us toward a stronger financial footing for the years to come. This concludes our presentation. We are available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We do not have any speaker slips on this item. I will say that again, I will commend the team for working diligently to put together a budget for this coming fiscal year that will allow us to continue to pursue the mission that we have. The unfortunate part about this, the difficulties we're going through now is that there's no clear end in sight, that we're not going to be challenged financially. So I think this is the right time for us to start looking at, and I give you credit for all the things you've already done to tighten the belt. The staff reductions were unfortunate, but just a byproduct of what we're facing, and in the end, trying to protect and house people and achieve the mission and the goals. While difficult, I think everybody's still focused on it. So, and I think that obviously the city's budget situation, big part of this, but everybody is having the same conversation about how do we tighten our belts and still move forward. So, Commissioner, comments? Vice Chair Homer.
As I believe the senior member of the board now, I just want to say that I think from the perspective of having seen these annual budget presentations going all the way back to pre-pandemic, what is very different this year and last year, I think, has a lot to do with how you are communicating our situation here. To be honest, the first few years I think I was on this board, it was very hard to get a clear picture of what the big long-term financial position of the agency was. And I hope that our partners and the city and others who follow this agency, I think we all are kind of on the same page. It's a very complex budget that you're dealing with. And so part of what is hard, I think, especially for newer board members, is, we have things we spend money on of varying priorities, all of which are important. And then our funding sources are all over the place, right? They're all over the place in terms of where they come from. We have a position being paid for by, a Wells Fargo grant. And so, our thoughts about how important that is in a budget crunch are kind of not relevant because that's money that's coming in, and the same goes kind of across the board all over the agency. The affordable housing revenue that comes from fees at the city fluctuates wildly. And so I understand why it was, kind of difficult to give a clear long-term picture in previous years. But I think that the situation we're in right now shows why that is so critical, that we all kind of understand where things are going and not just look at a spreadsheet once a year. And so I want to thank you all. This historically would be, a really difficult item, but the truth is that we've been dealing with this difficult item and a series of difficult items for a long time now. And so this board and you all have already done a lot of that heavy lifting, and we're just looking at the summary of all the heavy lifting that has been done. And what I'd like to, encourage in future years is it's incredibly important that the expert staff we have here and you are very much experts, that you continue to clearly communicate to the city, to the federal government, to the state, to our partners, to our employees, where things are headed. You know, what it means when we commit vouchers, what it means when we start new programs, and how we will sustain those activities, and what the trade-offs are. And that, for the past 2 years, that has been very clearly done, and it's very much appreciated. The last thing I'd like to say, could you go back to the slide that had the homelessness spending?
No, the proposed budget,
Yeah.
budget slide on 70 was where it had the,
Yeah, I think it was maybe one more.
one more. It's the next one.
Yeah.
That one.
That's, wait, no, that's staffing, yeah.
Yeah, the next
Sorry.
one. It's the next one. This one is, I think you're talking right.
I'm sorry, I should have just pulled it out. I think it was further back, but we had the breakdown of our,
Was it this? So there wasn't a slide that broke down all the different types of spending in homelessness, but there was a slide that broke down state, local.
That's the one we were just on.
sorry, there was, we had the storage, the hub,
Yes, it was more
the expenditures side, yeah.
all the programs.
Yes. I'm sorry, I think I imagined a spreadsheet that had the breakdown of those.
She talked about it.
Yeah.
The train threw you off.
Yeah, and just, you know, so much of our budget is locked in place. We have no control over it, and this is one that we have so many partners involved in the homelessness spending. As you mentioned, this is a proposed budget that we've sent the city. There are contractors related to all of these things that are operating on, you know, existing agreements, and I know that we've been, you know, trimming some of those going forward and finding everything that we can. But, you know, this is the first meeting in a while that we haven't started with the update from Casey, and so I just want to point out every single one of these things in my mind is a critical service. And while it is a relatively small part of our overall budget, and while we are very dependent on the city's funding here, as I look through that list, I kind of shudder to think what the immediate impact would be without any of those things. And so, you know, part of the planning that you all have been doing, I think, has been to provide as much stability as we can to those programs. And I hope that there's no substantial downward change to any of those, because the truth is that we should be thinking about ways to expand our services, and instead we're thinking about constricting them. And this is the bottom rung of the most critical services for people in the most desperate need in many cases. And I hope that those are not things that change in the coming weeks. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. This is an informational item that's a very important informational item, and I will end it with this, that you know, as Vice Chair Clunner was mentioning, it's a complex budget. I think sometimes where the clarity is important is because there are those who believe that just because we open the doors every day, we're making it work with ease. That's the difficulty, right? We open the door every day, we're serving people, you know, Casey, Jonathan, I mean, I know the whole team. Everybody just assumes that, well, doors are open, you guys are doing fine financially, and it's not a struggle. What you're doing with the budget is providing clarity of how complex it is, and how the money is, how certain funds are reducing. What all that means is it's harder to do the job. And we are unable to do the job at the level we'd love to do the job, but we're still going to do the job. So thank you very much. Appreciate that, the presentation. And if there are no further comments, we will move on to the next item.
Thank you both.
The next item up is the City Affordable Housing Fund Annual Plan. We'll take public comments after the staff presentation. Vice President of Financial Services, Christelle, you're back again. And the Principal Budget and Report Analyst, Matthew Higgins, will present this item, and the floor is yours when you're ready.
I think I can. Thank you. So good morning again. So this morning we are requesting your approval of the proposed fiscal year 27 Affordable Housing Fund Annual Plan. We'll start with a quick discussion of the fund and then take a look at the fund revenue over the years. Then we'll provide details on budgeted programs for fiscal year 27. The City of San Diego Affordable Housing Fund is composed of two permanent, annually renewable funding sources. The first one, the Housing Trust Fund, was established in 1990. It consists of revenue from housing impact fees on commercial development and loan repayments. Second, the Inclusionary Housing Fund, which was established in 2003. This one consists of revenues from the collection of fees on residential development and from loan repayments. The developer has the option to either build affordable housing units or pay fees that will be used in the creation and preservation of affordable housing. As you recall, the City Council approved changes to the inclusionary fees back in December 2019. These changes were phased in over 5 years, beginning on July 1st, 2020. The changes increased both the percentage of residential units that developers are required to set aside as affordable housing, as well as the amount of the fee if the developer decides to pay the fee instead of building on site. As of July 1st, 2025, following an annual consumer price index adjustment, the requirement is currently $25.92 per square foot, or 10% affordable units built on site. This slide displays the history of fee collection for both funds. The blue line represents the Housing Trust Fund, which hovers between $1.2 million and $3.1 million annually. The red-orange line represents inclusionary fees. As you can see, these fluctuate much more dramatically. In fiscal year 23 and 24, fee collection were around $700,000 and $2.9 million, respectively. But in fiscal year 2025, because the fee paid by two large development projects in City Center and Kearny Mesa area, the fee collection were $15.8 million. Many factors affect collection, including economic factors, development activity, the timing of fee collections, and the number of development that choose to build affordable units rather than pay the Affordable Housing Fund fee. For the purpose of the Affordable Housing Fund Annual Plan, and by extension SDHC budget, we used estimate based on historical calculation and current collections. Since inception, the Affordable Housing Fund has assisted with the creation and preservation of over 10,100 affordable housing units, assisted more than 31,000 San Diegans experiencing homelessness, and assisted over 410 households to become first-time homebuyers. I will now pass it on to Matt, who will share the model programs and the budgeted amounts for programs.
Thank you, Christelle. Good morning, everyone. Affordable housing funds may be allocated to programs identified in the list of model programs. For fiscal year 2027, we propose allocating funds to rental housing finance, homelessness activities, and loans to create accessory dwelling units that were committed in prior years and are required to be affordable rentals for households with low income. As part of the plan preparation, we continued to solicit feedback through outreach efforts. We made presentations to the University, Mission Beach, and Choice Valley community planning groups. A video of our presentation about the Affordable Housing Fund annual plan, including closed captioning, was also made available on our website and SDHC's public engagement portal known as Public Input. To increase awareness of the annual plan and the comment period, we also emailed households who previously participated in a survey for the study about residential evictions in the city of San Diego, as well as posting on SDHC's social media accounts. Members of the public were invited to provide comments on how they thought we should best use the Affordable Housing Fund funds. The comments we received are attached to the proposed annual plan. Now, let's take a look at the proposed allocation. Here you can see the fiscal year 2027 proposed funding allocation to the various programs as compared to the fiscal year 2026 allocation. As a reminder, the Affordable Housing Fund is only one of the multiple funding sources SDHC administers for housing assistance and homelessness programs. This plan includes the proposed uses of only the Affordable Housing Fund and the anticipated outcomes associated with the fund. The proposed SDHC budget, which you heard just a few minutes ago, reflects the proposed sources and uses for all of the funds we administer. For the Affordable Housing Fund, with an estimated $37.1 million in fund balance and $5.4 million in new revenues, we propose funding the following. $22.4 million towards prior year commitments from Notices of Funding Availability, or NOFAs, and committed accessory dwelling unit loans. These are funds that were awarded in prior years. Some of the NOFA developments have received board approval, while others are in different stages of finalising their funding stack. In fiscal year 2027, we're also allocating $9 million towards a new NOFA. Additional funding sources beside the Affordable Housing Fund will make a total of $22 million available in the fiscal year 2027 NOFA. We also propose allocating $5.8 million towards homelessness programs that include landlord engagement, prevention and diversion, and transitional housing grants. The remaining funds are allocated to ongoing capacity building, program administration, and some legal fees. The total Affordable Housing Fund plan commitments are $39 million in fiscal year 2027. Here's another representation of the proposed allocation. As you can see there, 78% is committed to rental housing finance activities for the production of affordable housing. Here are two examples of newly constructed affordable housing developments built with financing that included Affordable Housing Fund revenues. Today, we're asking the board to recommend that the City Council take the actions detailed in the staff report and shown on the slide. That concludes the presentation. We're available to answer any questions. Thank you.
So we have no speaker slips? Okay. No speaker slips have been submitted for item 101, so this concludes the public comment period for this item. Do any commissioners have any comments on the item, or do we have a motion? We have a motion from Commissioner Jackson and a second from Commissioner Cushman. I'll just point out one thing on this item. Which is, it was in the news in the past week that average rent in the city had decreased, and I thought that the story did a good job of explaining what was going on with that, but the stories I saw also completely left out the difference between what's happening with the market as a whole and what's happening with what we see, for example, in our Section 8, which is over the same period of time, the rent has gone up quite substantially. And I think this program, both in the incentive it creates to do on-site and then with the revenue that we get when the fee is paid, this is pretty much the only tool that we have at the city when it comes to market rate development and ensuring that we're providing something on the affordable housing end through that process. And so I just want to point out that even when we see the total rents declining, the question is what is happening at the lower income end of the market, and the answer is it is getting increasingly more expensive, and this is all we have to make sure that that new market rate housing that's providing the discounts at the top is reaching anywhere down into the lower income. So this is such a critical item. With that, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. The next item is 106. This is the final bond authorization and Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act, TEFRA hearing and resolution for Hillcrest Hall. We will take public comments after staff presentation. Senior Vice President of Real Estate and Development, Colin Miller, will present this item today. Please begin when you are ready.
Good morning, Vice Chair Klumpeter and Commissioners. Okay. The item before you today is a request to take the final steps to issue up to $20 million in tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds and up to $40 million in taxable bonds, as well as hold a TEFRA hearing to facilitate the acquisition and new construction of Hillcrest Hall. Hillcrest Hall is the proposed new construction of a 98-unit development, which is comprised of 97 affordable units and 1 unrestricted manager's unit. The project is located at 1601 University Avenue in the Uptown Community Plan area in Council District 3. The proposed project's 97 affordable units will consist of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units. All units will serve low-income households, including large families with incomes from 30 to 70% of area median income for the next 55 years. This equates to income levels from $39,700 per year to $115,800 per year for 2 to 4-person households. The project is designed as an 8-story building with 7 levels of residential housing and community space over 1 story of parking. Site amenities include a community room, a computer room, on-site management, a picnic area, playground, private balconies, and a rooftop patio. The developer, CRP Affordable Housing and Community Development, is a subsidiary of Castellan Holdings, LLC, an experienced for-profit development firm established in 2008. CRP Affordable owns, operates, and manages over 2,500 affordable housing units, with another 1,000 units currently in development. With respect to the proposed development, CRP received a preliminary award recommendation from Housing Commission residual receipts loan of up to $5 million from the fiscal year 2024 NOFA, or Notice of Funding Availability. This will be CRP's second project with the San Diego Housing Commission. Services for all tenants will be provided by Life Steps and will include health and wellness services, social services, financial literacy classes, and recreational activities. This slide shows the site map of the development. The project is located in the Hillcrest neighborhood of San Diego, and the development will allow residents convenient access to high-quality transit, schools, and other amenities such as groceries, medical facilities, parks, and recreation. The closest bus stop is located within 1/10 of a mile, as outlined in blue. I know the map is a little hard to read. It's the best we can do to get everything on one slide. Closest grocery store is located within 1/2 mile, outlined in green, and the closest school is located within 1 mile of development, as outlined in orange. The total development cost of the project will be approximately $72 million, which equates to a per unit cost of approximately $735,000 per unit. Notable sources of funding include bond finance permanent loans, a City of San Diego bridge to home funds, Housing Commission residual receipt loan, a deferred developer fee, as well as the previously stated state and federal tax credits. The Housing Commission loan in the amount of $5 million accounts for approximately 7% of all sources. Units will be restricted from 30 to 70% of area median income for the next 55 years, as shown on this slide. Rents will range from $930 per month to $2,895 per month for the 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units at each of the AMI levels. Should this item be approved today, the project will go before the Housing Authority for approval next month. Once approved, the project will close on construction financing in June and begin construction in July. The developer expects to complete construction in June of 2028. This is the architect's rendering of the proposed project. with your commercial and retail on the first floor and residential above. You are considering approvals to take the final steps to issue up to $20 million in tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds and up to $40 million in taxable bonds. Approval of the bond issuance does not commit the housing authority to issue bonds. The bonds would not constitute a debt of the city, and if bonds are ultimately issued for the project, the bonds will not financially obligate the city, the housing authority, or the housing commission, because security for the repayment of the bonds will be limited to specific private revenue sources of the project. Neither the full faith and credit nor taxing power of the city nor full faith and credit of the housing authority will be pledged for the payment of the bonds. Staff is recommending that the board take the actions detailed in the staff report and shown on the following slides. Do I just cut to the chase? Okay. This concludes the presentation. We had like 3 slides. This concludes the presentation. Representative of the developer and I are available to answer any questions you may have. Thanks.
We're not in that much of a hurry.
I couldn't tell.
No speaker slips have been submitted for item 106, so this concludes the public comment period for this item. Do any commissioners have any comments on the item, or do we have a motion? We have a motion by Commissioner Hubbard. Second. And a second by Commissioner Vasquez. No comments? Great distribution of AMI and number of units. I think it's not too common that we see a project that's covering that range of a span, 30 to 70. It didn't even touch 80%, and we've got everything from 1 to 3 bedroom, all of it in a good location, cool project. And it's great to see, I don't know if I say new developer, but it's great to see our pool of partners include newer actors. Commissioner Cushman.
I just think it's not a big comment, but interesting. On page 8 of the staff report, we constantly talk about prevailing wage, what effect it has on a project. So here we have 5 different projects. This project without prevailing wage at $734 a unit. 4 other projects with prevailing wage that range from $715 to $930. So I don't know what prevailing wage does. You know, people say, oh, it increases the price 15 or 20%. I don't know if it does. It depends on the project and what's inside the project and what the developers want to develop. But it's not 1 and 1 is 2, and if you add prevailing wage, it's 20%. I just think it's interesting.
I think that is a great point, Commissioner Cushman. And as you were doing the comparison there, which I really appreciate, I think we were all, or those of us here, were thinking the same thing, which is the AMI difference in those projects, the number of bedrooms per unit. I mean, to your point, there's so many factors in here that it's really hard to do a clean prevailing wage, non-prevailing wage comparison. But from the comparison you did, it is interesting that the non-prevailing wage project here is kind of right in the same range as the ones that do have prevailing wage. So, Colin, I assume that part of the costs that would be with the ones that do have prevailing wage are more on the AMI and the unit configuration side, or?
So, I mean, every project is different. I mean,
Yeah.
if it's to your point about the different units that we have in the board report, if a 3-story stick build is going to have a different type of trays than a 8-story concrete and steel, those trades are going to have different wages. So I agree with you. You can't draw the direct correlation that there's always a cost difference. Historically, you might be able to, but I think your construction type, in this case, they had to buy the land. You may have other deals where the land's donated. These deals are complex, and they have, whether it's the funding source, the location, the building style. Ryan, to your point, they're building large 3-bedroom units at AMIs from 30 to 70. It's hard to do affordable housing in general because of just a multitude of reasons. So when developers can cobble everything together, it's very hard to draw similarities between projects.
Does the AMI factor in on the cost side at all? Like, is it helping the developer in this case go lower on the average AMI, or are they securing other funding sources along with that.
Yeah, so the AMI is going to be driven predominantly by the funding sources. It won't have anything to do with you. It won't change what they build. What you'll see with the lower AMI, you'll have a lower NOI, lower rent you can achieve. Absolutely. And so that'll affect your capital stack. And so developers will need to go to more soft lenders because the property can only support so much debt at these lower rents. And so when you see deeply affordable housing, this is why the voucher program is so critical to doing affordable housing. You can do extremely deeply targeted projects, 0 to 30% of AMI, but you have to have that voucher, that operating subsidy. And so for this project to come forward with only 7% of the funding from the Housing Commission and such low AMIs is very impressive.
Thank you for, I think, confirming what we thought. Yeah. Okay, thank you. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed, say nay. The motion carries unanimously. The next item is 107. This is the final bond authorization and tax equity and fiscal responsibility act TEFRA resolution for Mercado Apartments. We will take public comments after the staff presentation. Senior Vice President of Real Estate Development, Colin Miller, will present this item as well. You may begin when you are ready.
Thank you. The item before you today is a request to take the final steps to issue up to $30,073,052 in tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds to facilitate the acquisition, rehabilitation, and new construction of Mercado Apartments. Mercado Apartments is the proposed rehabilitation and new construction of an existing 144-unit property, which is comprised of 142 affordable units and 2 unrestricted manager units. The project is located at 2001 Newton Avenue in the Barrio Logan neighborhood of San Diego in Council District 8. The project was originally constructed in 1994 and is affordable for households with income levels from 30 to 60% of San Diego's area median income, which translates to incomes between $39,700 per year to $99,240 per year for 2 to 4 person households. Once completed, the affordability restrictions on the project will extend for another 55 years. The proposed development will take the existing 144 units, demolish 12 of them, and then build 92 new units for a net increase of 80 units. The developer plans to rehabilitate the remaining 132 units, and with a proposed total increase to 224, of which 222 will be affordable. Relocation benefits will be provided for all the tenants. Additionally, site amenities for the project include a community building with kitchen, computer room, leasing office, laundry building, a playground, and on-site daycare. The developer, MAC, or Metropolitan Area Advisory Community on Anti-Poverty of San Diego County, is an experienced nonprofit developer and is in compliance with all prior SDHC loans, which includes a loan from 1992 for this property. If approved today, the loan will be recast for a new 55-year term. MAC will continue to be the service provider for Mercado Apartments. Services include case management and resource navigation. This slide shows the site map of the development. The closest transit is the Barrio Logan trolley station, located less than 1/2 mile from the property, outlined in purple. The closest grocery store is the Northgate Market and is located approximately 0.1 miles away from the property, outlined in green. And the closest school is 1/3 of a mile away from the project site, outlined in blue. Actually, that's the bus line. The bus line's in blue, the school is in orange. Sorry. The total development cost of the project will be just over $113 million, which equates to a per unit cost of approximately $505,000 per unit. Notable sources of funding included a bond finance permanent loan, assumed loans from the Housing Commission and the City of San Diego, capital contributions, deferred developer fee, and tax credit equity. Units will be restricted from 30 to 60% of the area median income for the next 55 years, and rents will range from $930 for a 30% one-bedroom unit to $2,580 per month for a 3-bedroom unit at 60% AMI. Should this be approved today, the project will be presented to the Housing Authority for approval next month. Once approved, the project will close on construction financing at the end of May and starting construction in June. The developer expects to complete construction in December of 2027. This is an architect's rendering of the development, the new development. You are considering approvals to take the final steps to issue up to a little over $30 million in tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds. The bonds would not constitute a debt of the city. If the bonds are ultimately issued for the project, the bonds will not financially obligate the city, the housing authority, and the housing commission, because security for the repayment of the bonds will be limited to specific private revenue sources of the project. Neither the full faith and credit nor taxing power of the city nor full faith and credit of the housing authority will be pledged for repayment of the bonds. Staff is recommending that the board take the actions detailed in the staff report and shown on the following slides. I and developer and a representative from the developer are available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. No speaker slips have been submitted for item 107, so this concludes the public comment period for this item. Do commissioners have any comments on the item, or do we have a motion?
Mr. Klemner, I have a problem with this project. I will not be voting in favor of it. As many of you know, I sat on the port for many, many years, and the folks who live in this project were constantly in front of us because of air quality issues. They blamed the port. They said by increasing the port, we're increasing asthma and all of the problems there too. And they were right. And the port has taken serious steps to try to help mitigate air quality issues in the barrio, including electric trucks, including redoing when trucks can come in and how they can come in, and cold ironing and all of the above. So to simply add more units with the air quality control problems we've got, we're just asking more folks at the lower income level, because it's affordable, to move to this area. And in good conscience, I just have a problem saying, yeah, let's bring more folks into this who are going to have more air quality problems. So responsibly, I don't know how I vote in favor. So I'm sorry, but I can't support the project.
Initially, I have a question and then a comment afterwards. So I noticed that the existing units are 144. However, they were built in 1994. However, there haven't been any additional upkeep. With if this project were to be approved, are there any provisions in the approval that would require improvements so that we're not continuously tearing down existing affordable housing units and then replacing them, and that the builders or the owners of the property are required to maintain them like the rest of us are required to maintain our properties?
Sure. So this project is not only new construction, it's also rehabilitation. So for the units that remain that were built in 1994, those will be renovated as part of this project. It's not simply tearing down and building new. So the developer can speak to any specific renovations you have questions to that end. But this is meant to be a densification project to bring more affordability to the area. And to I think the second point of your question was maintaining the property. So yeah, every affordable housing developer, part of what my team does is we'll do semi-annual inspections. And so we actually have staff go to the property, they inspect the property, they inspect units. We're not the only ones. You have a tax credit investor, you have a bank, they also send out inspectors throughout the life cycle of the property. The investors want to make sure that their investment is being maintained as well. The property also has operating reserves, and every year in its operating expenses, there is a reserve for replacement addition. So as the property does need repairs, there's a source of funds available to make those repairs. So yeah, that's all contemplated with this project and every other affordable project that we bring forward.
If the chair will entertain a follow-up question. I appreciate the confidence. As you well know, I was in the mortgage business before I became a licensed attorney. And so I do understand that there are the requirements that the hazard insurance evaluate the property, et cetera, in order to maintain it. But that would have rang true to this property that was purchased back in 1994. That now we're saying needs to be torn down and didn't. Well, my concern is this: for a property to exist that long and not have any maintenance or significant maintenance be invested in it, when we know that there's a high turnover rate of rentals and that everywhere else you see modifications to the existing sites. That's my concern. So I am deducing that because this property had not been invested into, and regardless if we were demolishing it and then rebuilding, we'd still have some significant reinvestments that we'd need to make into the property. And just want to ensure that moving forward, we're going to do more than what we did with this property back in 1994 in maintaining improvements to the property, because we know that maintaining property is the cheapest way to maintain affordability in our existing units.
Yeah, I can let the developer speak to exactly what they've done over the years, but staff, I've gone out there over the years, as this has had a housing commission loan. We've been inspecting the property, and there have been repairs made. So it's not like these properties are built and then nothing happens to them. As every time a unit turns, just like with the housing commission's portfolio, when there's a unit turn, there's renovations done. Things are replaced, painted, fixed, etc. This development's no different. I can have the representative from MAC give you specific details, but properties are maintained.
Can I just jump in? But what can happen, and it's happening on our own portfolio, right, is that as a property ages, those larger systems are impacted. And when you are very tight in what your NOI is, it gets very difficult. And you can come in and purchase a property and put a pro forma together that is going years out with cost escalators, but you can't factor in everything that could happen, right? Which is why having the property reserves we have now, and we're having to draw more on to do that maintenance, becomes a requirement. And when we do things like this, where you're basically being able to bring in and add units and bring money into rehab because the property isn't throwing off enough, I think it's still an opportunity. And the other positive side of it is that it keeps that affordability and those covenants and expectations on the property. So it may not be like at the quality that the owner would want it to be, but it doesn't mean that they haven't done the basic maintenance and investment that they've needed to do. So I think what this does is provide the opportunity to bring in additional funding, because those larger building systems are starting to fail, which happens. I mean, I'm not saying they're failing specifically, but that is what we see and what we have to do in our own portfolio too. But I know you might have comments, but I think when we have a moment, it'd be good to have the developer come up and actually speak to some of these comments directly.
Yeah, I'd like to give the developer a chance to weigh in here, but first I'd like to kind of share a few thoughts as I'm thinking this through. I'm going to work in reverse chronology here, starting with Commissioner Vasquez's, and I'm not sure, you've been very diligent on this point across many projects, so points for consistency. Yeah, I just want to kind of think through some of the alternatives and how this works. So one, there's an affordability term on the original 1992 project, and one way that this can go is the developer diligently sets aside money to do a full rehab with private dollars, let's say at year 30 or whenever those systems begin to need it. And because they have that money, then when the term comes up, this reverts to market rate and the affordability is lost. And there is no mechanism, because our terms with them were just for that period of time. And so if at the end of that period they don't want to re-up the affordability, we don't really have mechanisms. So when the developers instead put themselves in a position where the model is that they will come back and secure the rehab funds along with an extension of that affordability, it's kind of what we're asking them to do. And I think, to your point, it does not need to, and sometimes it does come with insufficient maintenance. I don't think we have any reason to think that this is one of those cases, and to Colin's point, we also do quite a lot of inspecting of those other properties to try to stay on top of that. But in the general, like when a developer comes and says, we've had this property for decades, it now is in need of more significant repairs, we want to secure your funding and extend the affordability, that's kind of like the win-win-win of all of it, because we get both the improvement to the property, we get the extension of the affordability for another 55 years. That's really valuable, and I think in a world in which we're saying keep these properties at tip-top shape the whole way, they would be reverting to market rate at the end, because why would they come back for these terms? The other thing, what I actually, before we start talking about this, what I wanted to drill down on a little bit more is the recasting of the loan, because I think it's really interesting, because this is another subject where one way the commission could approach this would be to just require maximum payback of those loans as fast as possible. We don't have to recast their loan. We could make them pay down the loan under its existing terms, right? In theory.
Yeah, so in theory, there's the ability to require full repayment of the loan, but that causes other issues.
Yeah, but and one of the other issues with that is that by recasting this loan, we're not putting any new money into this. We're putting forward the money that already exists in the project, and we're on the public end getting all of this additional unit creation and extended affordability. So that's how I'm there's always a trade-off, but I think we're looking at the same thing, and we want the same outcome, which is the most units at the deepest affordability for the longest period of time. And it's always just, this is sort of our trade-off. But I just wanted to flag that so that we're thinking through, I don't want a developer out there to hear that and then recalculate towards ending their affordability term. Does that make sense? Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think that our job is to push back and to have these kind of conversations, because we can't have them in a different space. This is the opportunity to do so, and I do want to echo my concerns as Commissioner Cushman brought up as well, is about the air quality. We've dealt with that when current Assembly Member David Alvarez was running for mayor, and the fact that he shared with everybody that his asthma is a result of living in that space. So I do want to echo the concerns of the air quality, as well as acknowledge the fact that that we have, when you know better, you do better. And so, yeah, do I expect the developers to do better to make sure that we're maintaining properties for long periods of time, so that we can finally make good on our promise to have a more affordable housing, and not build them with a temporary purpose in the hopes that as soon as the covenant expires, that then they can ask for tax dollars to build and start the units, and then turn around and displace the existing residents and the family members, and then rebuild at market rate values. I mean, we're over it. I'm over it as a San Diegan, and we then wonder why it is that so many people can't afford to live here and stay here. This is why. So yeah, I'm going to ask the same question. I want to know how we're going to be taking care of our investments, and I expect that I have pride in ownership of my home, and I expect that of the developers, and not of the tenants that are partners in living in this community. They have enough on their plate.
I share the concerns around the air quality, and Commissioner Cushman, as you were saying that, I also looked at this exact location on the larger map to see where it was in relation to other things in that area. I completely understand why you're voting the way you're voting. Here's the only I think difference in how I'm seeing it is, if there was a project that we had the opportunity to approve in place of this one in another part of the city, I would be all in favor of reallocating to an area that didn't have those environmental issues. Here's kind of my concern with how that environmental conversation, the environmental justice conversation is happening around housing, is that's a separate thing that needs to be happening and that we've all been pushing for to make it easier to build affordable housing in other parts of the city. Because I think we're all very aware of the concentration. I mean, we have presentations with, maps that show every affordable project in the city and how they're distributed, and they are distributed. We've seen projects in District 9 where it's the same thing. The sites that they're working with have contamination issues, and every market rate developer has passed on them for decades, and they're sitting there fallow unless affordable housing comes in and does something there. And the question is should that be the site that affordable housing is forced into deploying public resources in? No. But we need to have another plan both for how we deal with those environmental issues and for where the housing goes. And for reasons outside our control that exist both at the city and at the state, this is the situation that we're in. And I know that we've, put a lot of weight towards encouraging projects in other places. They get points for locating in certain places, and we're doing those sorts of things. But what I'm concerned about here is that we don't have any control over those actions happening at the port. They are happening. There are lots of improvements being made. We don't have any control over the land use. I think that the land use, that whole area, the land use has completely changed there since you were on the port, in terms of what industrial activities are allowed where. The Barrio Logan Community Plan update tried to address some of that. But fundamentally, my concern here is if we take that overlay of the air quality out of this is kind of ideal in the sense that we have a project of a certain age that is going to need significant improvements. Not only are we going to make the improvements and extend the affordability, but we're also going to, double the number, close to double the number of units?
80 new units.
80 new units. So I just, in my mind, when I think about the 80 families that would be moving into this in the future and posing that question to them, it is a very unfortunate thing that we have to, that for those families we say, we have availability in Barrio Logan here if you like it, but there's a shortage overall. That's a major problem. But I don't think any of those families would say, I'd rather you not build the home for me because it's in Barrio Logan. I think what we should be going for is we should have better air quality and we should be building affordable housing in more places. I just can't bring myself to say no to these opportunities. And this is not the first one that has come up with, trade-offs on this front. I can't bring myself to say no to that because in my mind, those fixes need to be made, but not at the expense of affordable housing. And I think the one thing that I'm kind of internalizing from all of these TEFRA hearings is, that affordable housing gets saddled with, and the residents of affordable housing and the people on the wait list get saddled with all the costs that other people have the resources and the ability to work around, that the developers have the resources and the ability to work around. So, this is, the example in D9, a lot of public money went into cleaning those sites up. There should have been another mechanism to clean those sites up and allow all kinds of other uses. Affordable housing was the route. Caltrans comes and collects huge fees from that project because no one else has built anything in the area and they have Caltrans improvements that need to be made. And, and again, it's here we are, affordable housing pays for the Caltrans improvements. I think this is just sort of another example. And what I'm afraid of is if we start pulling that thread, where we end up very quickly is we're going to just cut the number of projects we approve while we wait for other problems to get fixed that we don't even have the authority to fix here. So that's just kind of, I just see, this is a function of doing the best within the broken system that we're operating in.
So I respect your position. the principal residents of this property are Unite Here hotel workers. It is a perfect location for them. They're right at the trolley. They can move to all the downtown hotels. There's 100 reasons why it's a magnificent area. Their wages have still not come up to affordable wages where they can afford housing other than this type of housing. So thus, for all the right reasons, it's a great location. As then Councilmember Alvarez talked about his problems, my fellow Port Commissioner Duque Valderrama, his son living in this area, has to this day very serious asthmatic problems because of it. So I think we as public officials have to ask ourselves, is this a responsible thing for us to do? So should we say those who can least afford to live in other areas, well, we'll just let them all go live in Barrio area with all these ongoing problems? Yes, we've made progress. We talked about a 100-foot buffer when I was on the port, which we've never gotten, between the port and any residential. Never happened. I was never convinced air quality at 100 feet really meant anything. You know, if you build a 100-foot high wall 100 feet from the port, is that really going to stop all the air from going? Of course not. So I was never deeply embedded in that. I guess my problem as an appointed official is, in good conscience, should I be pushing more people into an area where I know they're going to have air quality issues? So for today, I would simply say, I would like my comments noted. I'm happy to give you an additional letter if you'd like. I would like them in the staff report that goes housing. I would like our staff to tell them, Commissioner Cushman gave you this and made these warnings, and then they, as elected officials, are going to have to put their stamp of approval on. And the next time 100 Unite Here workers show up, they're going to have to face them. But I've given my position in my limited role here to just say, I don't want to keep pushing people into an area that I know they're going to have health issues. Thank you.
May I? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I very much respect the position on that, and I may think maybe an actual letter rather than trying to take minutes of the comments would be a good idea if you want to have something attached to the staff report to go to the Housing Authority. So that's what I would recommend. Colin, there's people living there today, right? So there's people living in units that need a lot of rehab right now.
That's correct.
That's correct. My understanding is that the developer is not intending to relocate and move people permanently out of these units. The idea is that are they going to rehab units and allow people to move around throughout the project so they can stay there if they want to?
That's correct.
Okay. So I very much understand everybody's feelings about this, and everyone who's coming at this is coming at this from a place of heart and care for the people we serve and care for the roles that we have. But we also have to respect that people live there today, and the units they are in right now and will probably remain in because it's all they can afford are not getting improved and rehabbed. This is an opportunity for that to happen. And one of the things I learned actually more when I was working in the homelessness space, when I worked in San Bernardino County, is we can't decide where people's community is, and community is hugely important. So when you think about the folks that are in those units that maybe have similar jobs, they also have built community in that space that helps them watch their kids at the end of the day because they're working till 10 o'clock at night, or helps them get kids to school in the morning because their shifts go 24 hours a day. When we were running permit supportive housing in San Bernardino, we would issue a permit supportive housing unit to someone who was living on the streets in the city of San Bernardino for Victorville. And they would say no, because their community wasn't there. Their community was in the city of San Bernardino. Barrio Logan, for all of its challenges, is a very vibrant and thriving community that, yes, some people will say they live there because they can't afford to live anywhere else. Some people will say, I don't want to leave because this is where my community is, this is where my supports are, this is where my faith-based, resources are. It would be really hard for me to see that something like this wouldn't go forward so that the lives of the people that live there today can be improved, knowing that, to your point, we have to do both, right? Like, we have to, maybe there's something that has to be said around how frequently AC units or heating units or the vents are cleaned and treated, right? I mean, what else can the property do? And that's a conversation that maybe can be had. But I would hate to see the families there today not receiving better quality housing, and also potentially end up, because they have to leave that housing if it cannot stay in repair, losing those community supports that they have today. And the reality is, a lot of our hotel workers cannot afford to live and work any near where they work. So instead, they are either commuting hours on the bus or the trolley, or they are driving and spending way too much on gas because our gas is so expensive for their lower paying jobs to get here. So although we're all coming at this from care and hearts and concern, I'd hate to see the families that are there today not receive these additional resources and these better quality units, and at least have the opportunity to remain in their community if that's their choice.
One question here. So I recall the incident with the air quality a few years back. People show up at the port. What kind of liability does the Housing Commission play in this, knowing that we're building additional units and these diseases can pop up? Is there some kind of waiver that people are signing? Because this can come back to bite you in the tail a bit later on. But you know that there's a problem, that there's air quality issues between the city and the port. That would be my question.
Ultimately, the environmental quality will be dealt with either through an environmental impact report or a negative declaration that looks at these issues. And the elected officials who will vote on the project will have to take this into consideration in dealing with whether or not it goes forward. So there is a mechanism. Whether it gets utilized or not is a different issue.
The only thought on that was just that we know already that there is air quality issues, okay? And to bring a new person in, and they might not be aware of it, and you didn't tell them, you have some fault in that if they develop issues later on down the road, I would think.
So I want to pause for a moment here, because we're kind of going outside the scope of the commission here. I want to point out that there was a full decade, I believe, of work on this subject that was done through the Barrio Logan community planning process. And that process, resulted in a plan. The plan was repealed by a public vote of the city. It went through a new process, took years longer. It was this huge negotiation between the residents of the area, the industry around it, the elected officials, and at the end of it, everybody was on the same page, from now Assemblymember Alvarez, the current council member, the community groups, the industry groups, the planning department. Environmental impact reports were done, changes to the zoning were made that created more separations, and I don't think any of us here, except maybe Commissioner Cushman, although you were on the port prior to when all that happened, but we were not involved in that process. And what I'm kind of increasingly uncomfortable with is the second guessing of that, because the community plan process, the environmental impact report, the community planning group, all of the stakeholders they got input from, that was all focused on addressing where new housing could and could not be built, and where new industry could and could not be built, and where industry could and could not operate going forward. I'm not an expert in those things, because I know that dozens, hundreds of people put years into hammering out all those details. This is happening overlaid on top of that. They're not going to the city council saying, we want the community plan adjusted to allow us to build these units here. The discussion of how much housing could get built where, like, the community already had that discussion. And I think to Lisa's point, the plan that we're operating within here when it comes to all these issues was developed by this community to address their needs. And when it concluded a few years ago, they were all unanimously supportive of the outcome that had happened. And we're now just living within the confines of that plan. So what I'm very reluctant to do is to, push our scope out to second guessing the community plans, second guessing the environmental impact reports. We don't have the experts here on how that works. We don't have the community members here to express what it's like to live there, why they do. I mean, I've been going to a studio in Barrio Logan a lot lately. I've been parking about a block away from this site. I mean, that is a thriving, bustling community with, people that have lived there before the industry existed there. I mean, families that have lived there for, since before the air quality problem existed. And so that's kind of, I think Lisa's right. I mean, we're all thinking about, what is in the best interest of both the residents there and the people desperately waiting for new housing opportunities. But some of these concerns, I think, like there's a dedicated process. There's an environmental impact report. One of the few things that I picked up during that whole process, because I didn't really have anything to do with any of the Barrio Logan community planning process, but I did notice when it was ongoing, the Environmental Health Coalition year after year would ask candidates to make a commitment to only supporting affordable housing in this neighborhood, not approving any market rate housing, and that the only housing they wanted built here was affordable housing. Now, Commissioner Cushman, I disagreed with that. I have consistently said I have a big problem with that approach. I don't think that is essentially like redlining from the other direction, right? But I think it would also be kind of disrespectful to the folks that had that opinion to not kind of step back and think about, what they are saying about the affordability of their neighborhood and what they want their neighborhood to be like in the future. And what they were expressing was not the form that you and I encounter with other people in other neighborhoods, which is affordable housing belongs in subpar places. What they were expressing was, we want to be able to afford to continue to live in our community, and we're afraid that we're losing that. And I think we have to kind of balance that against everything else.
Okay, the first thing you said is absolutely correct. We've gone way beyond the bounds of I simply am expressing why I'm going to vote the way I'm going to vote. That's my right. I will tell you, Rachel Ortiz was not pleased with the end. And to your point, Lisa, 80% of the houses in Barrio are owned by absentee owners. This is not a community that lives there. This is startup housing for people working in NASCO. It always has been. That's what this neighborhood is. 80% non-residents of this community. So they get a job as an apprentice at NASCO, as an example. They rent a house here. Then once they become a journeyman, they move to Spring Valley or they move to wherever. And another apprentice that is this community. If the landlord is not maintaining the units, that's what we check every year. That has nothing to do with whether we rehab them today. If they're substandard units and they're slum landlords, then obviously our department and other departments, as was pointed out, are going to get them. So, Mr. Acting Chair is exactly right. We've gone far afield. I don't have a problem with the project. I just have a project in pushing people into areas that I know they're going to get sick. And I can't in good conscience vote for that. So we can end the conversation. I will be happy to make the motion to approve so we can move forward. And I appreciate everybody letting me go way afield of what our purpose is.
We have a motion from Commissioner Cushman. I just want to add how much I do appreciate you raising this issue, and I hope that everybody who might be having some heartburn watching us be on the edge on an issue. The lesson that they should take is that we want affordable housing equitably distributed across the city, and that it is a hard choice every time we have more affordable housing coming up in areas with high densities of affordable housing to begin with. It is a conundrum for us, and the only projects we have that don't have any of those issues are the ones that we love, that get built in areas that have been resistant to affordable housing historically. So the answer here is we need all of our partners out there. We need you to bring us projects all over the city. That's the only win-win-win going forward, really. So thank you for bringing it up, and thank you for highlighting these issues and the concerns that these residents face with or without this project. Yeah. We have a motion from Commissioner Cushman. Second. We have a second from Commissioner Jackson. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Nay. We have 2 noes and 3 ayes. Chuck, does that work that Commissioner Cushman both made the motion and voted no?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
for,
All right.
for sure, you can do that.
Right.
This will go forward.
It's just novel to me.
Well, you do it for the purpose of discussion and getting the vote out of the way.
Well, thank you all for that.
Just
Very
one
good.
issue. So this will go forward with no recommendation because it didn't get 4 votes.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But it'll still.
That's
go
fine.
forward.
Yeah, we'll
That's
still
fine.
go forward.
Yeah. It just goes to the council now. Yeah.
And that really makes my point
Yeah.
for the council. They're going to have to get into it.
Before I know we already voted. Before we, do we have a representative from MAC here?
I'm sure he's excited. What is your position?
I've been working on this project for a couple years now, and it's one that I hold near and dear to my heart. Barrio Logan. It's an area that I consider, this is personally because of my connection with it, because of my background, the core and heart of San Diego. And that's because you look at me, and I have this ability to identify with Barrio Logan because I grew up in San Diego National City. It's the neighboring city. And it's so unfortunate that on a daily basis we see that there is this aspect of gentrification that continues to be prevalent in Barrio Logan. And to continue this motion forward of having to be put in a position where you have to continuously tackle aspects of a proposal that are outside your control is a huge challenge. And I've mentioned it before. We have control over what we can place and propose in our parcel. And what we can do is to create an effort in a proposal, which we have done, that allows to mitigate the efforts of gentrification that are happening in this community. And thank you for bringing that up. You're right. So how are we able, regarding the 80% of how that population is being served or what is happening in the community? So how are we able to mitigate those effects with a proposal like this so that we can allow people that have grown up in that neighborhood the ability to continue to have roots in Barrio Logan? Is there an issue with air quality? Absolutely, there is. So how do we tackle that? But I would say don't allow that to be that wrench that you throw into the machine to stop these efforts. Let's keep it going. I asked your support in that. Please support me in this fact where we have a proposal, we're allowing this moment to combat against gentrification. Let's implement efforts to also tackle that. Again, I'm all for, like I mentioned previously, to being able to be in a partnership where we can have those discussions. And if that means that the project itself is positioned so that we can create that motion, that back and forth, I'm for that. Let's have that discussion. But let's not put it in a position where we backtrack efforts, year efforts, of our ability to combat gentrification that's happening at the heart and center of San Diego, Barrio Logan, because of issues that are externalities that I have no control over. That's all I have to say.
I have one question. I'm gonna try to see if there's like a simple solution to some of these concerns here. Which, that's an exaggeration. It's not a simple solution, but I've also never, I think, asked any project sponsor to make any kind of concessions from the dais or add things. But I am wondering in this until today, before this goes for its final approval, could you put some serious thought into and work with staff on whether there would be a way to have HEPA filters installed in all of the AC units or otherwise in all the units in this project, given its location? I know that there's a lot of very low cost ways to do that now, and that technology around those filters has really improved and the affordability has improved. It seems like just something that isn't standard across affordable housing projects, obviously, but given this situation, it seems like maybe we could sort of address some of the concerns just by sort of improving the indoor air quality here as compared to other projects.
We can absolutely have that conversation. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
That being said, are you reconvinced? I appreciate that.
Maybe the city council will ask about whether something has been hammered out there, and that'll convince them. So yeah, I think that'd be great. I think we're all on the same page here. We want housing. We also want the housing to be safe and healthy and affordable. So
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are on to non-agenda public comment. I know it was unusual that we did it at the end this time. We had limited availability of the chair this morning, and so do we have any? We have no public comments. Okay. No speaker slips have been submitted for non-agenda public comment. I'll ask any commissioners if they would like to make commissioner comments. No, I think we just have one thing left, which is Casey's report. And minutes, excuse me, two things left.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm here to provide a monthly update on our coordinated shelter intake program. So in the month of March, CSIP received 3,418 referrals for shelter, of which 260 were able to be accommodated for an 8% completion rate. The reason for the incomplete referrals was because, 52% were because we didn't have enough male beds, top or bottom, 18% the same for females, and then 10% were not completed due to no family beds. We'll note that in March, there was a 15% decrease from the previous month in the number of referrals. And moving on to fiscal year to date, we've had 25,579 referrals, where 2,123 were able to be completed for an 8% completion rate on the year. Again, the reasons mirror for the month of March, 51% because we didn't have enough for males, 21% for females, and 9% for families. As I've mentioned in previous months, we've been really working on our ability to track the unique number of persons referred, and I'm happy to say that we're there now, where we feel we can comfortably report out on that. And so, as a reminder, what I just reported out on is just the number of referrals we receive. And so, for the month of March, when we look at just the unique persons, of those 3,418 referrals, those were between 1,043 households. And so that actually represents a 3% increase from the previous month in the number of unique households that were accessing or trying to access shelter. Some reasons for that: referring partners indicated that the new unique contacts they were making were largely associated with recent activities to engage individuals in identified open space encampments, so just a little bit bump due to that activity. The overall, so if you look at unique, the completion rate goes from 8% to 16%, so a little bit, double, better. And looking on the year,
CSIP received, as I mentioned, 25,570 referrals, which is comprised of 5,486 unique households we're trying to access shelter since the start of the fiscal year. 39% of those households were referred just one time. 49% were referred 2 to 9 times, and then 10% were between 10 and 24 times over the entire year. So again, this is a different type of assessment of how many instances a household is referred before they're successfully placed, and that will be the subject of additional data analysis. This is really exciting for us to be able to drill down to this level, and so we'll continue to report out, but we can, moving forward, report out on the number of unique households that are served. One of the things that the initial assessment does indicate is that a significant portion of households are referred to shelter only once, and close to half of all households referred are between 2 and 9 times. So again, we'll continue to assess and even look at, subpopulation compositions and things like that to further our assessment. I do have a quick update since inclement weather shelter program is finished as well. As you know, this year was very mild. And so we closed out the year with only 29 activations, which if you compare it to last year, we had 54. And so it's a 41% reduction over the year, and actually 63% over FY23. We have served in this fiscal year 3,236 individuals or households, which comprise 77% of males, 22% of females, and 1% were children. Utilization rate this year fell at 69% on average, and the still number one way folks are hearing about inclement weather is word of mouth, 65%. So that's what I got.
Thank you very much. The continued improvements to the data quality are very exciting, and look forward to the further analysis. Lastly, we have the approval of the minutes of the March 13th, 2026 regular meeting of the board. No speaker slips have been submitted regarding the minutes. Do any commissioners have any changes to the minutes, or do we have a motion? We have a motion by Commissioner Hubbard. We have a second by Commissioner Vasquez to approve the minutes of the March 13th, 2026 board meeting. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously. This concludes the board's meeting today. The meeting is adjourned at 10:53 a.m. Thank you all.